Welcome to another edition of the Economy and Politics Show where we discuss developments in the economic space as it affects the populace. As you all know, tax is a very important aspect of fiscal policy that helps to drive government's activities and also, most importantly, revenue. How is Nigeria faring and how is tax administration contributing to economic development? Today, the conversation is around Nigeria's tax administration and economic stability. With me to have this conversation is Mr. Yomi Olugbenro, is a West African tax leader, Deloitte. Nice to have you on the program once again.
Thank you so very much for having me. It's good to be here.
Yes, it's been a long time since last year when we had the conversation during the pandemic period. A lot has happened since then, but it's interesting to see that a lot have occurred, particularly in the tax and fiscal space. But let me begin by bringing this to you. I guess you're aware of this fully that one of the CSOs, CISLAC, that's Civil Society Organizations, have called for robust steps by Nigeria to tackle tax evasion. And across the globe, nations have devised ways to tackle this tax evasion menace, whether it's US, UK, or even Asian countries like Japan and Thailand. They talked about the fact that about $180 billion is lost to tax evasion in Nigeria, and this is something that must be taken seriously. In your perspective, how is Nigeria faring in addressing and tackling tax evasion?
Right. Thanks so much. I mean, like you noted in your question and intro, this is a global phenomenon. Everywhere that you want people to part with what they consider as their hard-earned money, they devise ways and means of making sure that they do the least possible, in being caught or in rendering very fair and accurate return. So it's a global phenomenon, and so Nigeria is not immune. Nigeria is not immune to that. So what I think Nigeria is doing, I think it's both leveraging these global onslaughts, that is happening, and then also devising some local means. When I say global onslaught, so there are a number of global developments around the world that are aimed at strengthening tax administration and tax authorities in every jurisdiction, because it's got to be there's got to be some bit of global effort. All right, so if you're really going to be able to tackle serious tax evasion, you will need some bit of global collaboration, and that's why initiative like automatic exchange of information, and knowledge sharing and capacity building, across different tax administrations. That's the reason why that is quite well positioned. And Nigeria is a front runner in all of that, and making sure that we're able to leverage that. But I think what from a local standpoint, what I think the many of the tax authorities, particularly at the federal level, had been doing. It's one, leveraging the initiatives around getting hold of unique identifier for every Nigerian and every potential taxpayer. So even though some of these are not deliberately tax led, but there are opportunities within that space that the tax authorities can also key into. So you know that we currently have the national identification project currently going on. A lot of effort linking BVN, linking NIN, and making sure that there is a tax identification database that actually contain everybody. Now, this is part of the strategy as well, because the intention is that if you are able to identify everyone and you're able to link their source of earnings, it then become pretty difficult for anybody to hide whatever its source of earning are. But that's on the individual side, but also on the corporate side. There's also a lot going on with the review of our transfer pricing regulation, reviewing what multinational corporations are doing, across their businesses and within the country to make sure that we can curb, excesses, non-disclosure, we can limit the capacity of taxpayers to not be transparent and be able to bring them to book. So with all of that and ongoing tax audit, tax review, tax investigation that are going on, the idea is that the more hits you put within that space, the more difficult it is for anyone to remain on course.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you said, the more hits, because we've had a lot of investigations from even the International Center of Investigative Journalism, where the Panama Papers, if you remember, all the Panama Papers revealing certain billionaires and globally and even in Nigeria that have tax havens in certain countries in the Caribbean. So definitely, it is also a role of political will to tackle this, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, and we need a lot of that. So because the truth is that in as much as evasion and non-disclosure of taxable earnings cuts across every level of financial standing, we all know that it's at the very higher level that you can really get a lot. So you can have 100 people that are non-compliant, but maybe just 2-3% of them at the very top will contribute significantly into how much that is in financial terms. So when you say political will, that's actually quite critical because the majority of people who will be neck deep in all of this are people with strength and might. So those who've got financial muscle, those who are probably sometimes politically exposed, those who are in a way leading some large businesses and all of that. So at the end of the day, the strong commitment and the political will to make sure that whoever else is God, is brought to book would be a major factor in ensuring that we really achieve success.
Yeah, political will is very important in this. I remember several years ago when Greece was going through their own type of a recession, austerity. Remember the peaks, that's Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. There was the investigative journalist that published names of billionaires and celebrities who were evading tax, and a lot of these people were not happy with that. But just a way of sending that signal to government and the people that look, people have to be tax compliant, and clients like Greece they take tax compliance seriously. So definitely, political will is very important, and we hope that the government will match their words with action when it comes to addressing tax evasion. Well, let's look at a very interesting conversation that's been on and on, even till this morning. It's still a big conversation about widening the tax needs in the country. We know that considering the challenging economic times, we can't say increase the tax base because of course, the challenges in the economy, but widening the tax net and integrating the informal sector. And Mr. Yomi, I want to put this to you. In a city like Lagos, that is Nigeria's economic capital, there are taxes, but the levies, or what we call illegal taxes, where different groups just take from people in various trade groups or associations, and these are not captured in revenue. How can we balance this, ensure that we're widening the tax net and comprising everything, where we talked about the joint tax board, so many taxes, so many levies, and this is not incentivizing the informal sector to come on board.
Well, so I totally agree with your propositions, and I'm aware about the talks and all of the efforts trying to open up the entirety of the country, focusing on the informal sector, and all of that. But we mustn't have the mindset that the formal sector itself is home and dry. And so, in as much as we do have challenges, and there's a lot of that, and I will speak to that, we do have challenges in making sure that the informal sector is brought on board. I would rather want us to first of all ask ourselves some critical questions as to, what is the extent of the penetration even within the formal sector. So before we chase those who haven't got bank account or who haven't got their businesses brought into the financial space. So how much of those whose footprint and transactions are all digitized? They have bank account, a lot of transactions are going on. How many of that have we been able to actually bring in? Because in every country, the top 5%, of income earners in most cases will probably contribute 90% of the tax revenue. So you can have the informal sector and put in a lot of effort, but that would just answer the question of inclusion. It will only answer the question of making sure that everybody is on the plate. And I know that there are a number of some of these big players that are actually big themselves, even though they operate within the informal sector. But I don't always want that to be a point that we put on table to explain why the penetration is low, because our success within the formal sector is still quite limited. And remember that if you really go informal, if you really go to the very lower end, you're probably going to still have quite a chunk of people whose businesses and whose level of activity will probably still fall within maybe SMEs, and small businesses. If you earn 20 million naira and below, even if all of you are within the tax net, based on our law currently, you are not required to pay any company income tax. You are not required to pay any education tax. You are not required to carry the burden of VAT and all of that. So that's a significant group of the people we regard as, informal. So I think it is the semi-formal. I mean, I call some people informal, but there are formal informal. So they are not totally there, but some aspect of their businesses are actually difficult not to be in. Some of these people sell in cash, but they bring these goods in, from outside of the country. So there's some bit of formality. So because those goods don't just land in the country just like that, some of them take loans, from banks and financial institutions to be able to finance their operation. So there's an aspect of their business that is visible. Some of them do operate with large multinational companies, and some of those transactions are not actually cash based. So it is actually those that, if you say the Dumotas, or you go to Kanos, or you go to Onitsha, and it's actually the retail level that is actually real informal, and it's not so covered. So if we focus on where the value add, and the benefit to be derived will be heavy, I think we'll still move a lot more. And that's the whole question around what is a platform that we are using to actually run tax administration. To what extent is digitization? To what extent is technology, being leveraged in all of this? And technology is not just, you are able to go into the bank and pay some of your taxes, through your phone, or, by walking into the bank. I usually say that it's a long chain, it's a long web of the whole business flow that need to be caught within the digital space. And maybe we'll touch on that, and I can share a lot more on some of my concerns around that. So for me, I would rather want us to focus more on where, we can get more. That's one. Let's focus more on the so-called formal sector and ask ourselves critical question: to what extent the success level is high, we can then shift our attention to the real informal sector and see what percentage of these should ideally be contributing, to national tax revenue.
But I just want to ask Mr. Yomi, I know that the former Minister of Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, and the then chairman of Federal Land Revenue Service, Tunde Fowler, they had the various initiatives for encouraging those in the formal sector that were not paying their tax, like a kind of amnesty program, encouraging them to come on board, comply, and get some reprieve. And also some innovations have come on board, even with the current regime of Mr. Mohamed Nani, the FIRS chairman. So let's tie those two: incentives and the technologies and innovations we've seen in FIRS and across several state inland revenue services. Are those are they being more proactive? What would you like to see happen more in that regard?
Okay, so two things that you linked up together there. So and I'll touch on them briefly. So one is how did we fare, or what is the level of success we harnessed from some of the incentives, an amnesty program of the prior year. So we have voluntary asset and income declaration scheme. We have some other short-term exactly VAT. We have some other short-term amnesty scheme that were offered to corporate taxpayer. I think they helped in some bits. So one, they helped in opening up the space. It was good, way of communicating and letting the tax conversation be driven a lot further down. I mean, during that period, including social media and even the marketplace, tax became like a buzzword, and everybody was quite informed considerably about what is going on. But in terms of the revenue we were expecting to get from there, we barely scratched the surface. We didn't achieve the kind of number that we were expecting. But that's not unexpected. What I think is perhaps a lot more of a pain point for me is that I don't think we built up on the momentum created by those amnesty and be able to make some bit of scapegoat, show some bit of decisiveness, after that scheme were closed, because some were adopting it with the sit down and look, that local parlance that we say. So let's see whether there will really be a political way to take this further. And so, if after the expiration of the tax amnesty, for example, we leverage on the provisions that say, look, if you have failed to come through during this open window that we created for you, and you are caught still not compliant, we're going to make a few scapegoats of some high and mighty. We're going to make a scapegoat of some with some bit of political muzzle, or some celebrities, or some large businesses and all of that. I think that will have helped the system a lot more to realize that, look, that amnesty was really, really meant to create a soft landing for those who were non-compliant. So, but the way it has gone after that tax amnesty, I can bet you that even if another tax amnesty is introduced today, people will be like, there will be noise during that period, and when everything is over, we will all go back to sleep. So we need to be able to show some bit of energy and decisiveness in how we drive through some of these initiatives. So, but the window is not completely closed, and it's kind of linked to your second part of the question, which is the rest of the other initiatives. So there's a whole lot of initiative going on, and one of it is around the leveraging of technology, because ultimately that's one major solution to solving the low tax penetration issue. Digitizing and technology is not just because we are now, a pandemic make everybody to embrace technology, therefore we should leverage it. It's actually one that will help us to deal with the very fundamental issues of low tax penetration, low tax yield. How do we deal with culture of people that would typically not want to come forward unless you push them out? The limitations of resources that the revenue authorities do have. All right, so it's technology that can help us to answer all of that. And there's been a lot of move by FIRS, so e-filing portal, e-registration. You can do a lot of filing online, e-stamping, e-receipt. The VAT system is being, trying to be automated now, and trying to work with vendors to make sure that there are digital platform integrated with their invoicing application and all of that. So all of those are the effort that are going on. There's also a lot of effort around maybe leveraging the NIN initiative to be able to grow the tax database. What I only think, if you permit me, what I only think we should do in all of this is that I think we should rethink the whole digitization effort, right? The Finance Act gave, I told the FRS chairman last week at one of the conferences when we met, that the greatest gift that the Finance Act gave to tax administration is that it has now made legal provision for the use of technology. So you can't go to a client or a taxpayer and say, I want to deploy this solution and the rest, and they're like, show me the backing, the legal backing for this. So there's already a provision for that. We now need to rethink the entirety of the process, not just this, you can pay your tax through online, and then there's a separate portal for filing, there's a separate portal for this. The whole
So it should be
system
integrated.
it needs to be integrated in a continuous chain. So from the identification and the enumeration system. So let's make sure that this NIN project, this BVN link, we are able to get everybody in a single database. No one that is involved in any financial transaction in the country, either spending it, either investing it, either saving it, should be able to do that without visibility and without linkages to tax payment. So we need to do that. We need to be able to make sure that that system ensures that we are able to aggregate your income. The same way, if I pick you today and I have hold of your BVN, for example, that BVN will aggregate for us the entirety of your financial transaction in all of the bank that you have in Nigeria. So we should be able to make sure that we plug that to the tax identification system, where it becomes difficult for anyone to be able to have that large financial presence. And then when you come to the tax return, you can't really reconcile the two. So number three, we need to link it up to the assessment, to the returns, and to the and to all that FRS is doing. And I guess that is where FRS has been concentrating a lot. So you can file your returns online, you can make your payment online, but they then need to link that to the income source of those individuals so that we can profile individual. And then once we do that, we then have a huge amount of data in our hands for intelligence that FRS can continue to mine and then use that as the basis for risk-based enforcement. So you don't need to chase everybody. You won't even have the capacity to chase everybody. But data and intelligence helps you to concentrate your effort on where you will make the most mileage, right? So who are the big spender? Who are the big income earners that are avoiding to pay fair amount of tax? Chase from the top, from the top, and once you do that, you will send shivers down the spine of everybody that is hiding, and you will force people to be a lot more transparent with their tax disclosure.
I like that. I like that integrated structure. I want to ask you one question. You will just quickly answer, just maybe 30 seconds. Former chairman of the Corporate Affairs Commission Board, Mr. Demola Seriki, was saying recently, has reported that companies that fail to file their returns on time should not be considered for contracts or any engagements that has to do with government. What's your thought around that?
No, I totally agree. I totally agree that and you know that all companies essentially, even as part of their KYC processes, before you beyond working with government, even when you are working with multinational companies, either as an individual or a corporate entity, one of the things they try to do is to establish that you are a responsible corporate citizen that is worth doing business with. And part of the things they check is the level of your tax compliance. So some of them will ask for your tax clearance certificate. Some of them will ask for your evidence of tax registration. So the idea is that we want to promote responsible corporate citizenship. So when you do business in an economy, you have various stakeholders. So you have your employees, you have your shareholders, but you also have the government, and you need to be able to contribute your fair share to that particular cause. So I agree that it should be a culture that we should all encourage, not even limited to when you work with the government, but even when you are working with the rest of the corporate Nigeria. I can even propose that we expand that a little more. That say, for example, our national voters card, for example, if you are going to have a voice, in leading the country, if you are going to have a voice in choosing leader, I don't think it would be too much of an ask to say, for example, that our national ID card itself should also be linked to our tax identification number. So after all, it's only people that are 18 and above, who are supposed to be eligible to vote. So as many of those groups that are working, they also should be able to show evidence that they are a responsible citizen, and it's a constitutional requirement that everyone, it's a constitutional requirement that everyone should pay his fair share to the government. So for as long as you are involved in income generating activity, it's a civic responsibility. And when you do that, you then arm yourself with that clear conscience to be able to hold your leaders accountable, to be able to challenge when there are wastages, to be able to challenge when the national resource is being mismanaged. So I agree totally that it's a way to measure responsible citizenship.
Yes, and in addition, political office holders, those are aspire for political office, from president to governor to local government chairman, we should be able to look at their tax compliance too. And
Uh,
if they are,
No, I totally agree, and I know that currently, INEC usually will ask for tax clearance certificate of anyone vying for election. But what I think we should do further is to ensure that maybe an organization, for example, like FIRS, is also given some bit of visibility in that particular process, because I can sometimes you are not able to reconcile some of the statistics and some of the information you read on pages of the newspaper. Some of us don't have access to those documents, so we may not be able to say with fact whether those information are true. But instances where people vying for presidency of the country, senatorial roles, a House of Representative, gubernatorial candidate are providing tax clearance certificate that show that they had paid the 50,000 naira in a year, when some of them will give us the impression that they are running very large, thriving businesses. For me, I think those don't speak to each other. So we should be able to reconcile both sides. You can't come forward to say, I'm an established businessman. I've been running businesses for many years. I employ thousands of Nigerians. But when your own personal tax clearance certificate is produced, even the most junior person in that your employment should have paid more taxes than what you are presenting. So these are the areas where we can actually focus attention on, and let's know that responsible citizenship actually requires that you show how you have contributed to national development by raising its revenue, and not necessarily just being just taken out of the system.
yeah, very, very important. And a very interesting conversation we've had, Mr. Yomi Olugbenro. I know that a lot of key things that we take away from this is the digitization, which is very important, integrated um, process of digitization of our tax system in a way that the administration is very effective, and also the way in which we can improve compliance, the political will to it, and ensuring that there is a robust regulation review. And I like the fact that the Finance Act has a provision, legal provision backing technology. So, of course, digitization is the way to go. In the next 1 minute, I need to just speak to the Strategic Revenue Growth Initiative, SRGI. I know that a lot of conversations with the finance minister around that. She talked about the focus of more of performance, and we also know that government is targeting that in the next 2 to 3 years, we should have a 15% tax to GDP rate. Is that feasible? And from your interactions and working with the federal government, what are those gaps that need to be addressed to achieve this?
Right. So the Minister of Finance realizes that, look, one of the biggest challenges facing the country is revenue. People talk of a whole lot of other things, but paucity of funds is a major one. So what has been in the play by the Minister of Finance is how can we actually grow revenue sustainably, from a non-oil tax perspective, and a number of areas where they have identified in that SRGI. So one, for example, is how can we, make sure that we achieve sustainability. All right. So, and a number of levers that they have identified in that under that pillar would be that they want to improve collection. That's where the issue of using technology came in. They want to block legal loopholes, so, and that's where you have seen changes to tax legislation by means of Finance Act. We've had two consecutive ones, and just making sure that we collaborate more with our trading partners, and making sure that we manage performance of revenue generating agencies. There are also intention to continue to identify and enhance and enforce the existing laws. So if possible, are there areas where we can raise the rate when it is possible, or at least widen the base, if we can. You will see some of the things that has happened in the stamp duty area. You see what has happened with electronic tax, electronic fees that we charge on electronic transactions. VAT was raised last year. It was just because of the pandemic that no rate was changed this year. So, but the idea is that there is continuous focus and searchlight on whether it is band expansion, that can happen. If you look at excise duty, changes were made recently to make sure that locally produced goods that are excisable, if you import them, you are also liable to excise duty. Before, it was only local production. Imported items were not being charged to tax. So these are the different areas that revenue authorities continue to look into. I guess because of the current pandemic, many of the effort that focuses on raising rates or introducing new taxes have to be suspended because the economy isn't conducive enough for any of such. My thought is that as the healing continues and as the pandemic is brought to brought down, maybe as we get into next year, this conversation will reopen again. Whether say for example VAT, whether there may be plan to increase the rate or do some other thing, but that will be for the future, not for now.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Yomi Olugbenro, West African tax leader for Deloitte, for the time. Like you rightly said, please, they should pause that VAT raise for now because we're still trying to get ourselves together. And of course, it's very clear we need a robust strategy to improve our tax collection, and digitization is the way to go. We just want to see more political will in addressing issues like tax evasion and ensuring that we are doing well in compliance. There's a very robust approach to integrate the whole tax process, not just at the federal level, but at the state level, all levels down to local government. We need to improve tax administration. Thank you once again for the time, and we hope to have a future conversation on how we're doing in tax administration and the economy.
Thank you so very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And that'll be all for this conversation, the Economy and Politics show. To get further perspective on developments around the economy and particularly in the tax space, go onto our website, www.prochange.com, and you scroll down to the right hand of the bar. Scroll, you will see where we have tax and regulations. And of course, when you click on that, you see all the developments around tax. We have a robust site that gives you up-to-date information on what is happening in the tax space, covering regulators like Federal Inland Revenue Service down to even states inland revenue services, and all the developments from professional services companies like Deloitte, PwC, down to others, all covered in the tax space. Let's have this conversation once again, but don't forget this period, please stay safe. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.